I'm Allison Parc, and I'm the founder of Bren Whiskey.
Bren is made in the heart of the French countryside in Cognac. It is 100% organic and made in a style we call seed to spirit, with the intent of showing terroir in single malt whiskeys.
Cheers.
Hi, and welcome to The Power of No, creating boundaries and protecting your energy. I just loved the idea of showing up to a conversation titled The Power of No requires you to say yes. But we all know that in order to give a full yes, that also requires you to say no to many other things. So before we really jump in and dive in, I just want to take a quick second to thank our sponsors, Bren Whiskey and Widow Jane. Thank you so much for making this conversation possible. Thank you to Tales for making the space for this conversation possible. And most importantly, thank you to all of you for showing up and joining us in this most important conversation. So being busy is often viewed in our modern day society as a trophy. Speed is a currency, being seen out, travel, bars, restaurants, our industry are often used as marks of success, right? When you lose your sense of self and kind of get swept up into the many places, both virtual and in person, that are demanding, asking, seducing our attention, we can wake up one day feeling lost and exhausted beyond recognition, jealous and caught in a downward spiral. But there are luminaries who seem to show up and be involved and share and get vulnerable, dream, work, and accomplish without seeming to be under the weight of life. I got very intentional with who I chose to ask and why I chose to ask them to share on this topic today. I'm Allison Parc. I'm the founder and president of Bren French Single Malt Whiskey. I'm a partner at Samson & Surrey, which is Bren, Widow Jane, our two sponsors, Blue Coat Gin, Fuse Spirits, Vago Mezcal, and Tequila Ocho. I'm also a co-founder of Dream, Learn, Do More, a public speaker, Zoom queen, life partner, family member, self-timeout administrator. We don't have time to get into all the formers and the futures, but what I'm excited for with this panel is these are not just full resumed people. They are individuals who I've observed to be extremely centered within themselves. I've watched them move gracefully through this earth. And they are curious students of life who exemplify tremendous strengths in sharing their vulnerabilities. So if you've ever heard me give a keynote, you'll hear me probably say something like, if you are lucky enough to realize the sheer miracle that we are alive, then with that, you automatically accept that any moment we could go. So isn't that a blessing? Because then it's really conscious of we have to choose how we create the middle bits, right? So how are you going to create a middle that is satisfying to your core? That's such a big question. So on today's panel, we're going to dissect two really impactful parts of that: creating boundaries and protecting your beautiful energy. So I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves in 30 seconds each. We're going to go in alphabetical order, and they're just going to give you the bullet points of their current resume. And then throughout this conversation, you'll see the bigger, beautiful, deeper parts of who they are as people. So I'm going to start with Jazz and then welcome Joanna, Laura, Tara, and Toure in that order. Jazz, it's all you, my friend.
Thank you, Allison. It's awesome to be here. I'm super excited for this session. Hi, I'm Jazz Sawhney, also known as Tonight's Poison, an uber passionate spirits lover and a very extremely powerful and positive believing person. I have been in the alcohol industry for 15 years now, working for a local distributor here in New Jersey, Allied Beverage. My passion is marketing, and about 6 years ago, I created Tonight's Poison on Instagram, a way for me to share my industry knowledge with others. Over the last 6 years, I have made many new friends within the spirits industry, like Allison Parc. I'm excited to be on this panel with everyone.
Joanna?
Hey, everybody. I'm also super excited to be here. My name is Joanna Carpenter. I've been in hospitality for coming up on 18 years now. I'm an Asian American bartender, bar consultant, run the gamut in the industry. I'm also an equity, diversity, and inclusion consultant, and I am an artist as well. Super excited. Bye.
Laura.
Hi, my name is Laura Louise Green. I am a licensed professional counselor from Chicago, Illinois, with nearly 20 years of experience in the hospitality and drinks industry. I'm also the founder of Healthy Pour, which is an organizational consultancy that works directly with bars, restaurants, brands about mental health, working in hospitality, food, and beverage. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Tara.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tara Fougner. I am the co-founder and CEO of Thirsty Media, which is a women's owned international beverage media outlet. I am a social media strategist, a content creator, a community curator and builder. I am also a trained moderator and discussion facilitator. And I've been recently relocated to Miami, still in New York a bit, where I have been studying at USF, diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as community leadership.
And Toure.
Hello, my name is Toure, folks. I am in New Orleans by way of New York City. I'm a bar consultant, and I'm also the executive director of Turning Tables, which advocates for equity in hospitality, working with bars, restaurants, and also brands to change access and to create opportunities.
Absolutely amazing. You can see why I was so excited to have these incredible individuals with us today. So we're going to jump right in, and I'm going to invite Laura to help us define burnout. Let's start there, getting some understanding around what do we mean by burnout?
So burnout is, I think, an often misunderstood term. We use burnout a lot to describe exhaustion or depletion or feelings of maybe tiredness, and those things are absolutely parts of burnout, but burnout is actually a syndrome that comes on in different stages, different parts. So the first stage is all of those pieces: exhaustion, just feeling depleted, not having a lot of energy, fatigue, maybe a little bit of onset depression. The next phase that we typically move into is cynicism and dehumanization. So that's when you start to get real salty about work, when guests roll up to the bar and you're like, they seem really nice, but I hate them. When you start to kind of lash out at your colleagues, those dehumanizing pieces, or these cynical pieces of like, it's never going to get better, what's the point? And then the last phase that we move into is starting to underperform. That's when you are working 80 hours a week, but you're not really getting anything done. You're not really feeling the satisfaction of what it means to be putting yourself into something wonderful. I remember reading a Stanford psychologist described burnout as the erosion of the soul. So another way that we can think about burnout is actually exploitation, because it doesn't mean that we are giving. It means that we're giving without getting anything back. So we can see burnout happen at work. We can see burnout happen in our relationships. There's really not a limit to where we see burnout, but I think it's important to know that we can develop burnout if we're focusing on something for 5 hours, but if those 5 hours go into the ether without any return, then that starts to deplete at us. So those designations, I think are important, and it's important to ask yourself, am I exhausted? Because that takes one form of treatment, or if you're burned out, if you're experiencing the syndrome of burnout, because then that requires a different approach.
So show of hands on this panel. I have a couple of questions that I'm just curious if you're willing to share your experience just by show of hands. Who has experienced burnout, any of those 3 stages on this panel? I even see 2 hands from some. Who enjoys burnout? Show of hand for yes. Yeah. Who desires to live an absolutely enormous life and do so without feeling any of those 3 stages of burnout? Yeah. I wonder who in our audience is also raising their hands, popcorn hands from Joanna. Who is working towards that goal of living very full without burnout? Yeah. And has anyone on this panel, have you ever experienced, even just for a moment, of living kind of how you feel to your maximum in terms of not just scheduling, but in terms of like the value you can add in your life in any given day without running that parallel track of burnout? Have you experienced that kind of bliss? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, got it. Perfect. Well, I think that is very telling and very clear, at least to say we are constantly works in progress. And by being here today, we're not saying anyone up here is absolutely the end all be all authority. These are our personal experiences that we are opening up and sharing. We are especially grateful that Laura's here as our mental health professional as well, to hopefully also offer some real, factual, educated advice and tips and resources for us as well. And just so you all know, watching at home, we will have a slide at the end that does have a couple slides that has some additional resources. So do stay with us all the way through the end. As well, at the end, there's going to be a slide for each of the panelists with their key takeaways from this discussion. So in that, we're going to move into the two main sections of this conversations. We have around 20 minutes for each of these sections, and we're going to move to establishing boundaries. And I think the healthiest thing we could do in a conversation around boundaries is first establish our boundaries. So beautiful Miss Laura, if you don't mind joining me again and helping to establish our boundaries in this boundary conversation.
Absolutely. So what we're talking about today is specifically around our personal boundaries and where they overlap with our professional boundaries. It's essentially in a personal work context. There's a lot of conversations to be had around boundaries, and it would be, frankly, irresponsible to touch on them and not dive in further. So we are keeping this conversation to talking about that intersection of personal, professional, and how challenging that can be working in this industry. I also do want to point out that depending on what you do within this industry, within this sector, it's really hard to set boundaries if your needs aren't being met. So if you are, let's say, a bar owner, or you are a person who has power over people's income or benefits or what they have access to, it's hard to set boundaries for people if they don't have enough to pay their rent, to, care for their family. It becomes impossible to set those boundaries. So within this conversation of wanting to set boundaries and explore what our boundaries are, it has to be acknowledged that that's inherently a privilege. And when people can't set those boundaries, it's because there's some sort of system in place that is prohibiting them to do so. So that's something to consider throughout this conversation, certainly, but also as you walk away of, what you can do to empower people to be able to set boundaries for themselves as well.
It's so incredibly important, and I appreciate all those frameworks. As this group, as we have met, setting up this beautiful experience together, I have learned so much from each of you, and I love this title, this power of no. And no is a really strong word. Tara, you've had some really cool framing and powerful experiences with no. Would you mind sharing and kind of kicking us off in this direction?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much to both of you for setting the stage with some blanket statements for all of us. And I'm going to try to use I statements because of my experiences. And what really helped me with boundary work and setting boundaries for myself and creating space for discovering my needs was this relationship with the word no, right? In my study of communications, no is a communication tool. We should allow it and empower it, the word of no, to help us define our likes, our wants, our preferences, how we want to be in community and relationship with other people. So us saying no to something, when we use the word no, it is in the same way that people, can use yes. When we're in a relationship with someone, we have a choice of saying yes or no. If they want something from us, we need to navigate, what are we prioritizing? Our needs or their wants? So using the word no just allows us, again, as a communication tool, to say no to help them realize what we would want. And if we're saying yes when we actually mean no, we're setting up a different type of boundary, which is an inauthentic one. It's a blockage. If we're saying yes when we actually mean no, if we're saying yes to something that we do not want, and we prioritize their wants over our needs, we're presenting an inauthentic version of ourselves. So what helped me was reframing no and redeveloping the relationship that I have with no, especially as a woman. We've been taught, say yes because you want to be agreeable, you want to be likable and be sugar and spice and everything nice. But redefining and revisiting and reframing my relationship with the word no, to give it out in however I would like to. There's lots of ways to say no. And Allison, we had talked one time about like the happy no, or the not right now no. No can be said in many ways, or it could just be a full sentence no. But what has really helped me was learning to accept no from other people has really allowed me to communicate no when I need to prioritize my needs over someone's wants.
It is, I mean, I'm taking notes again as you speak. This, the importance of reframing no for yourself, I think, is extremely big. And when I heard you say often we'll give a yes when we actually really want to give a no, and we're playing to our inauthentic self, that to me like triggers my feelings of burnout, right? I feel like that's when I can quickly slide into that burnout space. Jazz, I want to ask you, because you and I we've thankfully, luckily been in friendship for a long time. We've both given each other's no's. We've received each other's no's. And you are someone that I watch and admire because you live this very full life professionally, and you have this very healthy marriage and these very healthy friendships. And sometimes I just go, how the heck does he do it all? And seem to be humming and buzzing and really, really up in like a higher vibration. So I was just wondering, what do you think of all of this? Where's your mind today on boundaries and no?
Well, I'm thrilled always to interact with people and go out and meet new people, meeting this panel here, but we have to realize that no matter what, life's most precious commodity is time. And just like your savings portfolio, you need to diversify it and use it wisely. You have to make wise investments with that. So put some in work, put some in family life, your passion, building yourself, resting your mind and yourself. If somebody was to give you $1 million today, how would you spend it? Would you spend it all on vacations or $1 million car? Or would you balance it out between needs and wants? And that's basically setting boundaries and saying no versus yes to certain things, gives the credit to the most valuable, precious commodity in your world, which is time.
A diverse time portfolio, that has stuck with me since you've said it. It's like every time I look at my calendar or I say yes to something, I'm going, is that where I want to be spending my time? Anyone on our panel have anything to add on that specific aspect of time diverse portfolio? Tara?
What I think is really powerful about what Jazz said, and in some of our prep, we talked about this, is that something that's helped me is also reframing my boundaries within myself. As we all read off our resumes and our little bio links, our slashes, a lot of us live in this slash lifestyle where we do more than one thing, and allowing ourselves and understanding what our boundaries are can really be helpful in understanding what, again, revisiting for myself, what my needs are, and figuring out what those personal boundaries are, not only that I present to other people, but for myself. So Jazz, that has been really helpful, and I've been thinking about that for a bit.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tara.
Sorry, Jazz. Sorry, go ahead, finish.
Well, I was just going to go back to it and to add to Tara what she said, balancing. We always use this word balance, but do we really balance it? There's so many things we practice by saying and posting on social media, all these motivational quotes, but do we actually put them into practice in our actual life and change our habits, right? We want to go to the gym. We go to the gym once or twice and we stop. Whatever it is that you want to practice, balance is huge in your life in all types of aspects of way. Balance of helping others and helping yourself is basically the key. One thing I always mention to my sales team, I used to manage them, is about juggling. Life is as you grow older, there's more things that come at you, so sometimes you're in a habit of pleasing everybody and saying yes. When you're born, your parents teach you how to catch a ball. You go through the college education, you learn to juggle 3 balls. But when you get to reality of work life and all these, side gigs that you're doing or whatever it is, you're juggling 12, 15 balls. It's okay to drop 5 or 6 balls as long as you're managing your main stuff, that things that really matter, and not just saying yes to everybody. Let those balls drop.
Okay, one of the balls I've dropped is perfection or striving for perfection. So I love this analogy. Laura, I think you had an add-on, and then I'm going to go to Toure after that.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of diversifying your time, and Tara, you brought up the slash lifestyle, and how we identify a working life. Diversifying your identity and diversifying our identities in terms of what we do and how we think about ourselves, how we interact with the world around us is a really, really healthy way also to set boundaries. If we let one identity take over our entire personhood, that can be sometimes a very gratifying thing, but it can also be a really dangerous game to play, because then when there's a global pandemic, suddenly the bartender persona that you carry around that has become your entire personality doesn't have any outlet. So, a recommendation that I would have in terms of diversifying your identity, which then will inherently also go to diversify your time, is who am I? I am a daughter. I am a sister. I'm a friend. I'm a musician. Joanna, earlier you're like, I'm an artist, and then I'm also a beverage professional. I'm also a counselor. These are all things that I do, but it's important to recognize and value all of those different parts of ourselves as well. And then it's easier to start to create boundaries because we've defined them for ourselves in the first place.
Toure, I love, thank you, Laura. I couldn't agree more. And this diversifying our identity is such an interesting concept that I feel like we could do an entire panel on that alone. Jazz said something about habits, and you and I have had some really cool conversations about it. And in the context of this panel, I was wondering if you'd be willing to share your experience with habits and boundaries.
Yeah, one of the things I realized as a community leader is that to be an effective community leader, you serve so many different people, and you won't be effective if you say yes to everyone. So I had to change my habits in order to be effective. You don't want every day to wake up and feel like it's Groundhog Day. The analogy is that like every day is the same until you start to change like little things and tweak little certain things within that day. To give an example, a friend suggested to me, at one point, you can't do everything. What is the best use of your time, and how does that time serve you? So figuring out that there was things that I could delegate, figuring out that not everything had to be answered in that moment. You don't have to answer that email right away. You don't have to answer that call right away. There's just like live within the moment of the things that serve you. Be present where you can. And so packing my day and realizing that, I was just going nonstop was not something that was serving me, because I wasn't showing up as the best version of myself. So in order to change that, you have to, within your day, kind of schedule your day in a way where there is time for yourself and it's not like go, go, go. Because in order to show up as the best version of yourself, you have to account for that one thing that's the most important, you. So scheduling that time in the day that's for yourself and creating those habits.
I used to, when I was going through a divorce, I remember I started taking myself out on solo dates, and I would say, and it was hard, right? It's really hard. It's hard to sit at a restaurant and not pull out your phone, right? And I would just force myself to sit and have dinner by myself, and I would take myself to art galleries and things like that. And I used to say to myself, well, gosh, other people want to seem to want to spend time with me. Shouldn't I want to spend time with myself? I love what you're saying. Like, And like what I'm hearing from you in this reframe of getting conscious to what habits have you created for yourself already? Are you physically on your calendar scheduling time for you? And I just lost my train of thought on the third part. So you said it beautifully. I don't need to recap your words. Laura and then Joanna. I'm curious, where are you both in this conversation? Laura, let's start with you.
So something that I've been harping on a little bit for the last year and a half, and maybe a little bit before, is the boundary of relationships within the hospitality industry. And this thing, hold on to your butts, folks, because this thing that we do where everyone's our friend. You know, oh, my friend in Omaha, oh, my friend in New York, oh, my friend in here, my friend, my friend, my friend. And suddenly you have this cachet of 4,500 Facebook friends who are all your friends, but like, who's actually your friend? Like, you know, something that I think about a lot also within a work context is if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. And if everyone's your friend, then really who's your friend? And I think, you know, I'll be transparent in the sense that this is like, that's a painful thing to wrap your head around a little bit. Like, I have in my office where I am right now, I have what I call my beautiful mind windows, because it's just surrounded by windows, and I use a dry erase marker, and when I write down notes. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I have this like considerations to explore: loneliness, boundaries, inauthentic relationships, guise of closeness, and shared trauma. So yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's like, this is me just like scrolling things out, being alone in my apartment, you know, thinking about like relationships and closeness. And, you know, I think that there's a lot of reasons why we connect with each other in what feels like a full way, but it's also very shallow. You know, we do have this sort of shared trauma experience that kind of comes, unfortunately, with working in the hospitality industry, which is, you know, my life mission to kind of repair. But, you know, if we talk about it within the context of burnout as well, one of the mitigating factors of burnout is social support. So if you are experiencing something, if you are putting something out, getting that social support back to what you're doing will start mitigating the effects of this burnout syndrome. So I think a lot of the times what we're doing is reaching for any sort of social support that we can get our hands on, you know, feeling that community, camaraderie, and closeness that comes with, you know, being in community with people and intimacy. But if it's shallow, we're not ever really filling our cups back up again. So, you know, a boundary that I really enjoy practicing and create safety around me too is to call my friends my friends. And if I consider someone a friend, to like be their friend, like be present with them. If I work with someone, they're my colleague. If I'm in community with someone within the drinks industry or whatever, I'm in community with them. You know, taking the steps to define who that person is to me, what that relationship is, and acknowledging it and embracing it. That's my colleague, that's my peer, that's my associate, that's whomever. That way I can put my energy and care into the people who I love and like love, not just like appreciate, but love and appreciate, you know? So that's something to think about too. Take your time with that one. You know, that's quite a few journal entries if you journal, you know, some processing, but also just having real conversations with yourself about, you know, who is my friend and what does that mean?
Can you speak as well in this same vein about the unhealthy, I don't know the word, about calling people that you work with a family or calling your work a family? Can you touch on that a little bit?
So I was talking with another therapist friend of mine that he's like, your family are kind of like the people who you go to when you need money or when you need a ride to the airport. Like, is your work gonna like give you a loan, an interest-free loan? Are they gonna drive you to O'Hare, which in Chicago is like the ultimate? Actually, I think it's driving people to Midway. That's the ultimate like show of love. But, you know, the term family is so enticing because it does really like foster that feeling of belonging. Like we all want to contribute to something and we want to feel like we belong. And that's built into our like genetic makeup so that we can survive and stuff. So it's understandable that it also comes up in the workplace, but we want to feel like we belong. We want to feel like we matter to people. And when we refer to people as family, which is like a big word, a loaded word, you know, because family isn't always rosy. Sometimes there's trauma attached to it. Sometimes there's, you know, stuff built into that. But if we call the workplace family, what then do we call the other stuff? Because that's not family, that's the workplace. I was actually watching The Office, and the new HR person, that spoilers, that Michael Scott falls in love with, she's like, this isn't a family, this is the workplace. And I was like, oh, The Office. And if The Office says it, it means it's serious, you know, obviously. But it's something that I would really encourage people to move away from. This is so capitalist of me to say, but I'm going to say it because I think it helps to reframe that organizations are not families, but families are organizations. So it makes sense that the dynamics and the moving pieces and the relationship pieces would be similar and might elicit different or similar feelings, I would say. But I don't think it should be so radical to think that organizations can care for people who work within that organization to the point that they want to look out for them and even have big feelings for them without crossing that boundary of calling them family. That shouldn't be so radical. I think that should be built in. So if you find yourself calling your workplace family, again, rewind a little bit and be like, what's that about? You know, might I get that level of fulfillment somewhere else in my life that's not the workplace?
Thank you. I have a feeling reaction to that as well, but just to give equal time to hear from Joanna.
Sure.
On the topic of boundaries as well. And then if we have time at the end, we can come back and circle for reactions. Joanna, hi.
Hi. So I'm gonna take a risk and get a little vulnerable here in a way that I actually have not really publicly. So I love that we're having this panel. I am the most burned out I have ever been in my life. I have not yet processed the trauma of the last year and a half. I basically I took 4 days to like freak out when New York City went into lockdown. And then I picked up and went into go mode and I have not stopped. And now it's all catching up with me. And I love the framework that has been laid out so far, especially in terms of diversifying time. And Tara and I have had many conversations about saying no and how to do it and how to protect your energy. And I am currently in the process of learning some really hard lessons about myself and what I have sacrificed in order to say yes to everyone else. I've always been somebody who believes in being of service to my community and to people I don't know and to people on the street. Like I live to be in service of people. And it has gotten me to a very frightening point. You know, when we think about burnout, like Laura, I would love to have a conversation with you at some point about emotional numbness, because I've been there and I've been there for a while. And the only way I can pull myself out of it is by saying no to things. And I'm paying attention to how this is manifesting in my body physically. And luckily I'm an athlete. So I've been trained to be very, very in tune with my body. And the exhaustion, the fatigue, the depression, the anxiety, the stress, the fear, this sense of relentlessness that people in this industry in particular, but also in the arts industry, which is, I straddle these worlds, the sense of relentlessness of FOMO, of not having a permission structure to say no, to set boundaries, to protect your heart, to protect your energy. I'm having to learn an entirely new language in how I move through spaces and who I make space for and how I do it. Because I'm finding that a lot of people, especially because I'm very public about the types of education that I do. I'm finding that people will be very willing to invade my space and take from me without giving back. And so at that point, it becomes, I don't even have the chance to say no. They're just in my space, taking from my energy bank, and they've tapped me out of the finite amount of emotional resources I have for that moment, for that day. And it just sends me deeper and deeper and deeper into a spiral. So it's really interesting to kind of ask this question of, if I don't say no, if I don't leave this person on red to protect myself, if I don't find whatever straw I can grasp at to protect my own energy from moment to moment, because I'm in damage control survival mode right now. If I don't do that, what's going to happen to me in an hour? How am I going to feel tomorrow? And that's a scary place to be. And I also know that I am probably not alone. And I know that a lot of people who are probably in this headspace, we just keep going in this industry. We just keep going and we say, yes, and we put on the face and we do the song and dance and all that shit. And I'm just wondering, I'm wondering how we can like stop that. So that's where I'm at.
I see you, I honor you, and I recognize you, and thank you for sharing that here with us and the wider audience of us today. It is extremely powerful to be able to even recognize that is where you are today. So you have done so much work to even be able to articulate that and recognize for yourself that you need to hit the brake pad for a second. It's very, very big, and I thank you. We're going to move into this section called protecting energy, and I'd love to, if the panel's cool, just flip Joanna to the top, because if you're ready, Joanna, because in following up what you just shared, you and I have talked about the emotionally expensive. I'm going to segue this conversation into protecting your energy, but if you're ready, I would love to kick it off when we move to the panel part. I got a thumbs up, Toure, and then we'll go into you after. Thank you to this group, because I feel like all we want to do is just give everyone a big giant hug right now. So in that giant hug space, I'm going to move us into protecting energy. And I really think that protecting energy and creating boundaries are two sides of the same coin. So to people listening, it may, on certain things, wherever this goes, it may be a little challenging to put a distinction, be like, wait, was that energy or was that boundary? It could be seamless, right? These are just waves in the same ocean. So I just invite you to continue to stay on this journey with us. I want to start this off with a little anecdotal story a friend of mine shared recently at a dinner. She's a very experienced lawyer. She's been practicing law since the 1980s in New York City. And in the 80s, when she started, it was during a recession. And she and her other first years were like downstairs in this super fancy Italian cafe that was in like the lobby of their very swanky building. And they're all standing around eating croissants and drinking their fancy coffees going, isn't this wonderful? We're getting paid to waste our time. This is the life, right? And someone in the group goes, whoa, you all don't get it. They're paying you to waste your time. Literally, you could hear the utensils in the restaurant at that moment. Like, I feel like the whole world just stopped for a second. And it really set me back and made me really, again, consider, where is the intentionality in my day? I feel like it's so easy to live my day to the fullest in my calendar, but am I really living that to the fullest extent of my personhood, right? Not over giving, not overextending the calendar, but where am I, who am I behind all of these identities, and where is that person living today in the space of energy? So especially, I think this is a very timely conversation as we're straddling this balance, in this not post-COVID, but another space, another area of this COVID pandemic where we're still going outside now and still doing the virtual. So this is a really funky time. On that funky time, Joanna, are you cool to pick back up the mic and share a little bit about the energy as emotional capital concept.
Oh yeah. Sounded like the Kool-Aid man. Okay, so I really, really love framing our energy and our emotional energy, because physical energy is directly tied to mental and emotional energy. They're inextricable, as a form of money, basically. So, and this is really inspired several years ago by an artist by the name of Heather Christian, who has a song where she speaks very candidly about, you have a bank in your heart, right? And that has stuck with me for so long. And the more I have thought about it, the more I have worked with this concept, the more I have taught with this concept, I think it's really, really valuable to compare your emotional stock to something tangible like money. We all enjoy money. We also deeply understand our relationship to money, right? So what if we treated our emotional energy as a resource such as money? You know, I don't know if anybody on this panel is a millionaire who doesn't have to think about money, but I think for the most part, everybody I know is in a position where you have to think carefully about your finances, but we don't attach the same care to our emotional energy, our emotional finances. So when I'm thinking about whether to say yes or say no to something, I'm very curious. The first thing I ask now, and this is something that has evolved over the last couple of years, the first thing I ask is, how much is that going to cost me? And is that thing or that person or that interaction or that relationship development going to make a deposit into my emotional bank? Now, sometimes you're doing something or you're saying something or offering something or sharing that energy, and it doesn't make a deposit into your emotional bank, but you find a reason to justify it because you are doing something good. You are, you can feel good about something. Other times you're making a deposit into somebody else's emotional bank and they're not giving it back. So you're just depleting your own stock. You're lowering your own emotional value effectively. I think in an ideal world, we are in workplaces and in relationships, both professional, platonic, and intimate, and in community, in ways that make equal deposits to our depletions. But I don't think a lot of us are, for lack of a better phrase, curating our relationships that way. Going back to what Laura was saying about family and friends and how we use those titles and how we use those labels. My question is always, and if it's, somebody's like, oh, can you teach this workshop? Oh, can you come do this audition? Oh, can you come do this guest shift? How much is it going to cost me? Because we cannot not acknowledge where we are. And if we're doing things that are too emotionally expensive, we're teaching people how to treat us. We can't do that.
I love this parallel between your you're relating energy to money as like a tangible concept that people can really understand, as well as Jazz did with time, right? I love these two parallels. Are there any reactions to this from the panel before we move to Toure? I see no blinks. Oh, one. Jazz, go ahead.
Just to add to it, as it is, getting energy, being energized, especially as we get older, is tougher and tougher. You can be the greatest, the brand new Tesla model, which does 0 to 60 under 2 seconds. But guess what? The heavier foot you have, the more energy it depletes, right? And it's difficult, more and more difficult to refuel that energy. And for me, I'm sure for everybody on the panel and people watching, constantly we're looking for new ways and exploring new sources of energy. So it's really important to Joanna's point, to treat it like money, because it's really hard to make it. It's really hard to have it. And you're consistently battling to try to get more renewed energy and trying to motivate yourself and have that energy. So you got to be very careful with that currency.
Totally. I also think, especially for anyone who's a manager or director or in any position where there are people under you on the organizational chart of a company, take your vacation. And when you're on vacation, do not send your emails. You got to lead by example here. Take that vacation. Do not send emails when you have a very clear out of office. Just don't do it. Let people go. Realize that it's okay then for them to do the same when they have their time off. Toure, you have been on a journey. Come on in and talk about, if you don't mind, some of your examples and your cautionary tale type of approach with this beautiful space of protecting energy.
Yeah, when I think about some of these Olympic athletes right now, like, Simone Biles, who is on top of the world and, has accomplished everything, but people want so much more from her. And she was just like, no, like, I can't do this for you. I have to do the best thing for myself. And I had a moment during COVID where, I found out that my mother was diagnosed with cancer. Everyone was leaning on me emotionally. All of a sudden, every Black person became the expert on, equity or diversity or racism. I was doing food insecurity initiatives. I was just go, and realized that there was a moment where I had to realize that what was the most important part of that equation. And that goes back to realizing the stages of burnout that Laura mentioned in the beginning, that was starting to happen to me, that I had to eventually just say no to something that wasn't serving. For me, prioritizing what was the most important thing. The most important thing to me was family. The most important thing to me was the organization that I fought so hard to create in the midst of COVID. Prior to COVID, it was more important than anything that was a new development. Those people could wait. Even if it's, I didn't have to answer someone slipping into my DMs and then answering those emails and then answering those calls and then doing all the things. Like, I just had to take a step back and prioritize my mental health, which meant, something that I will mention later, which is, getting therapy, taking time to take a step back and processing everything. Because I can relate to Joanna on that very same tip that, like, I didn't get a break during all of this during COVID. I was just like nonstop. In that moment when you realize that, like, holy shit, I didn't get to develop a hobby, or I didn't get to do these things, from learn a different language, or these, like, all these things that people like suddenly did during COVID. I never had that moment. It's like, man, like that's a cautionary tale that, like, I could have used that time for myself, like everyone else did. That was the most important thing that we all could have learned from that, is that all you have is time, but you don't have time. So, like, make the best use of it when you have it.
It is so powerful. And I think, especially in this industry, like Toure, like Joanna, I have heard of other people who haven't stopped yet to process even what occurred last year. Maybe parts of that is catching up. And like you said too, Toure, like, realizing that some people had a lot of people had a lot of different experiences with what we were still in the midst of, but especially the kind of swell of 2020. But I take it you have no sourdough starter in your refrigerator. Yeah, that's a hard no. You had massive, beautiful, incredible things, and I thank you, because we got to work a little bit together during the course of last year, and it was really amazing to watch you unfold in this big way. Tara, hi. This is a big one. We're dropping bombs all over the place. How are you feeling? Where are you? What would you like to share where we are now?
I mean, I am, my heart's full, and that actually just made me revisit, what I was going through during the pandemic. And everyone suffered some loss. Everyone suffered some form of grief. And I lost my big sister during the pandemic. So on top of that, it's like, while the world was going on, I, as an entrepreneur, and I own my own company, if I wasn't making money, like I wasn't being able to live. So I, luckily with my therapist, made a plan for myself, and I hit pause. While a lot of people were pivoting, I hit pause, but I still kept the company going in one way, shape, or form. So into another piece that I want to talk about, like, there is this need in our industry to be on. And I'm sure a lot of people can understand, like, that need to be on, but no one really understands what people are going through at any moment. And that's why boundaries are important. You don't owe anyone your story. And although we work where people play, that phrase, like, I live where you vacation, shout out to Miami, but we work where people play. And we work in an industry where alcohol is present. So that brings in a whole nother layer of blurred lines, like what Laura was talking about, these assumptions of relationship. There are so many assumptions of this person's killing it, or I know this person because I know them from social media. I know them from being in community. I know them from XYZ, but we don't owe them anything. And as we lived in very much a social media space, so many people did not know what I was going through. So I needed to develop my ways and my coping mechanisms to go through my grief, because not everyone, I don't know anyone my story. You know, I still struggle to talk about it in some ways. So as we move from social media spaces where people might think that they know me, and I put myself out there quite often for people that perhaps are members of the Thirsty Facebook group. I advocate for a lot of things. I bring up a lot of tough conversations while facilitate and moderate, but that has left me open for people feeling like they deserve some element of access to me. And as whether it's in social media spaces, hitting me up on DMs, and just like Joanna was saying before, like they just don't give you a chance to set a boundary. But I've developed my ways to allow people to understand how I want to be in community with them. And whether it is leaving them unread, whether it's in social media, telling them, I need consent. If you want to speak to me, if you want my time, if you want my advice, if you want my help, if you want my advocacy, first you have to ask me if I have the capacity for this. Because there is nothing wrong with saying, not right now, not ever, or just flat out no. And sometimes no response is a response. And, you know, to bring that into physical spaces as live events are coming back, you know, again, alcohol is involved. When you're in spaces with people, they make these assumptions. Oh, that's my friend, that's my homegirl, that's my whatever. It is important to take these boundaries from social media spaces to virtual spaces to physical spaces. And Nedra Tawwab had taught me something that I thought was very helpful in coming up with scripts. So when we are in spaces, again, we don't owe anyone anything. You know, they might be like, oh, that's my friend. No, actually, I don't really know you that well. Remind people how we are in a relationship. A boss, like, oh, we're family. No, my family's there. Find ways to communicate that work for you. You know, oh, let's take a photo. Not right now. I don't want to do that. Let's go to the next party. I'd like to wake up early. I'm not going to be there. Let's do a shot. I'm not drinking tonight. For what? No, I don't want to. Let's go out to dinner. Let's go to this fancy new place. I'm prioritizing my financial health right now. So for me, I think it is, as we practice saying no, also give people, it allows us also to give space. Hey, Allison, Jazz, Laura, Joanna, Toure, do you have a moment? I'd like to talk about this. And I think that once we practice that, it creates so much space all around, and it makes us feel more empowered with the.
Again, Tara, every time you open your mouth, I take a million notes. It's so powerful. I love this concept of presetting your scripts. So when you find yourself at 2 a.m. at that bar with X number of drinks in your system, trying to remember how to establish your boundary, right? If you can kind of help yourself before you go into that, reminding yourself in that evening, what is your boundary? I do want to wake up early. I do want to prioritize my financial health, like whatever it is. And just to be able to have that and really stand comfortably in it is so key. Just one build I heard when you said at the end, you know, saying, hey, Tara, do you have a minute, you know, or a moment to talk about X? Something I found really useful in business and in personal life is to let someone know how many minutes I'm asking of their time and then to respect it, right? Do you have 20 minutes to talk about blank? And I set my timers all the time, and I will not go over that what was requested unless I get a new agreement with them. Hey, it looks like we're coming up on the end of the 20. I just want to check with you. Do you have another 5 minutes to wrap this up? But let me tell you how many more people will give me a yes when I go, I truly need only 2 minutes of your time to clarify something with you, or I need an hour for this conversation. So really, really solid points. I know we're getting near the end. And so I want to make sure we give this conversation the full space it needs. So we're going to move into Laura and then wrap this particular section with Jazz. Laura, welcome on up.
Yeah, you know, there's so much here and my brain is like, you know, kind of going a little wild, but I do want to I don't often like self-disclose in a big way, but like, you know, let's talk about hustling a little bit when we have our side hustles and stuff. I think it's important to truly ask yourself, what do I want to be doing with my time? Where do I want to be putting my energy? You know, I spent a lot of years in a dope job, like with the most beautiful portfolio and the most wonderful suppliers and great colleagues. And I just had the best job for 3.5 years before I came fully into Healthy Pour. But I did hit this point though, that I was like, I'm giving all of my energy and time and space and capacity. Like, yeah, we do have a finite capacity, right? Like Jazz and Joanna were saying, of like what we can give to something. And I was giving so much to that and doing a very mediocre job with like the mental health and hospitality stuff. But I loved beverage and I loved my portfolio and I loved all, you know, that wasn't untrue. I had this moment of like, I would rather be better at the mental health and hospitality and be mediocre at this job. And that's a hard thing. That was a hard thing for me to wrap my head around, because I was like, well, this is my primary income. And then I was like, but how can I start shifting to, you know, do that other thing? So I don't know. It's also, that comes back to the identity thing too. I had this moment of like, there's a lot of people who could really benefit from this job that I love so much and I really enjoy doing. But I don't know if there's so many people that can do mental health and hospitality, and I love it so much. I want to be doing that. You know, so that became a boundary event, and it became such a large boundary eventually that I was like, bye. And now I do Healthy Pour full time. So taking that time with yourself, and there's a lot of barriers to making changes like that in life, you know, financial barriers, you know, spatial, all of these different things, but taking your time with yourself and really acknowledging and honoring what it is that you need, and then start taking one step at a time towards moving into that space where the energy that you give is also the energy that you're receiving. So I'll leave it with that.
So big and beautiful. I know we are coming to the end of time for this discussion in this space. Jazz, you've got a particular line that I'm kind of excited for you to share, if you mind.
Well, life is not consistent, so I need to be consistent in staying present to what is and is not working. That's basically kind of summarizes it for me.
I mean, that is it, right? Just bringing some consciousness, bringing awareness, understanding how to recognize the signs of burnout, establishing these boundaries, and taking a lot of the amazing juicy bits that we've heard today about protecting your energy. When we close, Tails will have some slides for the takeaways from everyone on this panel. For those of you watching, hopefully you'll just be able to pause your videos and take some screenshots. We don't have the time to go through them now. But right before I close, I do just want to give it back to Laura, because there are going to be 2 slides that'll be put up with some additional resources, and I'll let her just frame those out for you right now.
Absolutely. So just really, really quick, on these slides, you'll see different reading lists, things that you can do to start to continue on this journey of starting to identify your boundaries and your needs, and, you know, protecting your energy. There's also information about where you can find a therapist on a sliding scale if you're not insured or for low cost, or just a therapist in your area if you are insured. Different resources if you feel like you might be drinking too much or consuming another substance a little bit too much. So yeah, take a look at those. Also on the Healthy Pour website, healthypour.org, all of these are linked there. Also the reading lists and the podcasts are all linked on there as well, including all sorts of different tools and worksheets that you can start to work through that are essentially operating as journal prompts that you can work through identity stuff, a daily page for work-life boundaries and balance. Lots of great resources there to help you continue on this journey so that you can protect your energy a bit more.
Thank you, Laura.
My pleasure.
A very, very genuine thank you to everyone on this panel for saying yes and for showing up to this conversation. This is a big one. I hope that everyone who said yes to watching it got a lot of information. Again, screenshot these resources and take a screenshot of these takeaways from everyone here. I also really want to thank Bren and Widow Jane for putting up the money for this conversation. For me, there's really nothing I love more than a very good, deep dive, juicy conversation with a glass of whiskey in my hand. So send some love, follow everyone here, including these two brands on social media. We would love to stay. Oh, thank you, Jazz. Stay in the mix with all of you. And also very big thank you to Tales of the Cocktail, because to me, I think the moment we stop living is when we stop learning. So you said yes to continuing your education. Tales has said yes to creating a very cool platform for everyone in our industry to continue our education. So thank you. I appreciate all of you. And we'll see you on the world, around the world.